Somebody took a blessing from all of us, and we will get justice.
Breaking news, a young mother who was just days away from giving birth was shot and killed this morning while in her own bed.
Police say 26-year-old Devin Anthony has been taken into custody. It happened at a home in Riverdale.
We now know why, and I need you to hear this carefully, because when the arrest affidavit was released, it contained a detail so small and so violent in its implication that it reframes everything about this case. According to court documents obtained by Law&Crime, investigators say Devin Anthony walked up to Shakiya Pridgen's bedroom window and fired 11 shots because the relationship had recently ended over two things: an accusation of infidelity and the fact that Shakiya had chosen a name for their baby that he did not agree with. She named her son Kyren. He allegedly killed them both over it. Let that breathe for a second. Not a fight that spiraled out of control. Not a moment of rage that came from nowhere. According to the affidavit, there was enough time between that disagreement and those 11 shots for him to find her apartment, find her window, find the right room, and pull the trigger while her 1-year-old and her 3-year-old were lying right beside her. That is not a crime of passion. That is a decision. And we need to talk about everything that was allowed to happen before he made it. Before I go any further, I need you to do something. If you're watching this and Shakiya's name is new to you, subscribe to Mystora Crimes right now and hit that bell. Not because of the algorithm, because of her 2 surviving children, who are going to grow up in a world where their mother exists mostly in videos like this one. When you subscribe, you are telling us that her story deserves to keep moving, that we are not going to let it disappear under the next headline. 1 click, that is all. Do it for her. Do it for Kyren. And then stay right here, because this story goes so much deeper than a name. Shakiya Pridgen was 23 years old. By every account her family has given, she was warm, devoted, and fully committed to building something real for her children. Her father, Paco, called her a loving, sweet, caring person with a good heart. Her mother, Verdina, described a woman who had just signed her first independent lease, who attended church regularly, who was raising a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and still showing up every single day with something left to give. Think about who you have to be to carry all of that. 9 months pregnant, 2 toddlers, a brand new apartment in your own name for the first time, church on your schedule, baby shower planned. That is not a woman who was standing still. That is a woman who had decided exactly what direction her life was going in and was walking toward it with everything she had. And 4 days before she died, the people who loved her gathered around her to celebrate Kyren. They brought gifts. They took pictures. They argued about names. Probably they imagined his face. Those photos exist. The family shared them publicly afterward, and they are almost unbearable to look at now. A smiling mother-to-be. A room full of people who had no idea those were the last good moments. No one in that room knew that within 96 hours, she would be gone and Kyren would never take a single breath outside of her. Now, here's where the psychology of this case starts to get very dark, very specific. Because the name detail from the affidavit is not just a motive. It is a window into how Devin Anthony saw Shakiya. And what it reveals is chilling. Naming a child is one of the most intimate acts of parenthood. It is a declaration. It says, I am this child's parent. I have a voice in who they become, and that voice matters. When Shakiya chose Kyren, she was doing something completely normal. But according to investigators, Anthony didn't see it that way. He saw it as something being done to him, something being taken from him. And the fact that he allegedly responded to that feeling with 11 bullets tells you everything you need to know about the dynamic underneath this relationship. This is what coercive control actually looks like in its most extreme form. It does not always start with violence. It often starts with a belief that the other person belongs to you, that their choices are not really their choices to make, that when they act independently, they are not exercising a right, they are committing an offense. Shakiya had broken up with him. She had her own apartment. She had named their baby without his approval. In his mind, according to what investigators documented, each of those things may have registered not as her living her life, but as her taking something from him. And that framing that psychology, is exactly why intimate partner homicides so often happen at the moment of separation, not during the relationship, after, when the person finally pulls away completely, and the one who needed control realizes they have lost it. But here is what makes this case so much bigger than one man and one terrible decision. Because Devin Anthony was not supposed to be free to make this decision at all. In September 2021, a Fulton County grand jury indicted him for murder in the shooting death of a man named Ronald Barner. Murder, not manslaughter, not an accident. A grand jury reviewed the evidence and said, formally and legally, that this man should be tried for murder. That is not a minor charge. That is the state of Georgia looking at what happened to another human being and saying his life matters enough to pursue the most serious charge available. 3 years later, in November 2024, Anthony accepted a plea deal under Georgia's First Offender Act. The murder charge was reduced to voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 20 years, with 11 months to actually serve. The rest? 19 years of probation under the First Offender Act. If he completed that probation, the conviction could have been wiped from his public record entirely, as though it never happened. 11 months for killing a man, and a legal mechanism that could have eventually erased even that. Ronald Barner's family deserves to be named here too, because long before Shakiya, there was already a mother somewhere grieving a son who was taken by the same man. And that family watched the plea deal reduce their loss to a footnote in someone else's second chance. Then February 2026 arrives. 4 months before Shakiya's window is shattered, Anthony is back in front of a court. He tested positive for THC, a documented probation violation, and the court's response was 60 days of revocation and an order to complete anger management classes within 30 days of release. 60 days. Anger management. For a man originally charged with murder. 4 months later, Shakiya Pridgen and Kyren were dead. Her mother, Verdina, said it with a clarity that no legal argument can touch. He got a second chance. Shakiya doesn't get a second chance, and he shouldn't be allowed a third to do it to somebody else. He should have never been let out. Her father, Wakiel, who found out just days before Father's Day, said something that landed differently than anything else in this case. He said, "I am not supposed to be burying my daughter. My daughter is going to be burying me." And then about Anthony, he said, "If you wanted to kill your own child, you'll kill anybody. You don't have a heart. You're just a menace to society." Think about the weight of that. A father who is burying his daughter and his unborn grandson, standing outside in the aftermath, telling the world that a man who was willing to fire 11 shots through a window while his own children were in the bed chose to do that. Chose it. That is not an accident. That is not a tragedy in the traditional sense of the word. That is a series of choices made by a man the system had already told twice that choices like his carried consequences, and then quietly walked back both times. And now Shakiya's family is not just grieving. They are organizing. Following the killing, 11 Alive reported the family has called publicly for reform of Georgia's First Offender Act, specifically how it applies to violent offenders. The headline from that story says everything. The system failed us. That is not a metaphor. That is a verdict the family has rendered on every decision made between September 2021 and June 16, 2026. The traffic cameras confirmed his vehicle at the scene. He is currently held without bond in DeKalb County Jail on charges of malice murder, feticide, 2 counts of aggravated assault, criminal damage to property, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. A trial is ahead. The full weight of the legal process is still in motion. But here is what I want you to sit with right now as this video ends. He did not agree with the baby's name. That is what the affidavit says. Not a threat, not a confrontation. A name, Kyren, that was enough, allegedly, to walk to a window before sunrise and fire 11 times into a room where his own children were sleeping. What does that tell you about what this relationship actually looked like behind closed doors? If a name could trigger this, what had Shakiya already been living through before anyone outside that apartment had any idea? What had she already survived, already managed, already quietly absorbed before the night she couldn't survive anymore? And here's the question I keep coming back to. The court had him in February. Documented violation, violent history. pregnant ex-girlfriend. What would it have taken for the system to connect those dots before June 16th? Was the information there? Was it just never assembled in the same room at the same time? I want to hear your answer. Drop it in the comments right now. Do you think the Georgia First Offender Act should be reformed to exclude violent offenders? Do you think the February probation hearing was the moment everything could have been stopped? And what do you think was really happening inside that relationship in the weeks before Shakiya had her baby shower? This is the conversation that Mystora Crimes exists to have. If this case moved you, subscribe right now. Hit that bell. Share this video so her name keeps traveling further than the Atlanta news cycle. Every comment, every share, every subscriber is one more person saying out loud that Shakiya Pridgen and Kyren mattered, that we are paying attention, that we are not going to let the system stay quiet about what it allowed to happen. Rest in peace, Shakiya. Rest in peace, Kyren. Your family is fighting, and so are we.